In these examples, I'm going to be talking about unit rates. So remember that a rate is going to be a ratio of two quantities, but the two quantities have to have different units. So we could write this $45 for 9 hamburgers. We could write it 3 different ways, remember using our ratios. So we could say $45 to 9 hamburgers. And whenever we're writing our ratios, we're making sure that we have the units as well. Or we could say $45, and then we have a colon, 9 hamburgers. And then, of course, our last one is going to be a fraction. So we could have $45 over 9 hamburgers. Okay, so you'll notice here that our ratios, we can call this a rate because it has a unit on top and a unit on bottom. And the units are different. The top we have dollars, and the bottom we have hamburgers. So $45 per 9 hamburgers is kind of the idea. So in order to make this a unit rate, we're just going to go ahead and do the division here. A unit rate is any rate where the denominator is 1. So a unit rate needs to have a 1 for the denominator. So in order to do that, we'll actually just go ahead and divide. So 45 divided by 9 is 5. So now we can say it's $5 for 1 hamburger. And that's going to be a unit rate because we have our 1 in the denominator. In this second example, we read that a cheetah can run 360 feet in just 4 seconds. So like we saw in the previous example, you can take this and make a ratio out of it 3 different ways. 360 feet to 4 seconds, right? You can use the word to or you can use a colon. But let's just go ahead and look at this as a fraction. If I have 360 feet over 4 seconds, and I'm going to abbreviate feet to FT and seconds to just SEC. Okay, so I have a really nice rate right here. Remember, a rate is a ratio, but has 2 separate units. So our units on top are feet, and our units on bottom are seconds. So in order to make this a unit rate, I need to go ahead and do the division on our numbers. So 360 divided by 4 is going to be 90. Well, what does this mean? It means that our cheetah can run 90 feet in 1 second. So really what we're focusing on is not just simplifying the fraction, because you're not guaranteed that the denominator will be 1 when you simplify a fraction. We're actually just going to go ahead and do the division and force the denominator to be 1. So 360 divided by 4 is 90 feet for every 1 second. So you can write it that way and reduce it. Sometimes, and a little further down your math study, you kind of probably write it this way. 90 feet, and then you could say per second, just like that. So either one of these would be just fine for our unit rate. In this example, we read that the recipe calls for 2 cups of sugar for every 5 cups of flour. So I could go ahead and write my ratio, like I said, 2 to 5 or something like that. But let's look at the units, because in order to be a rate, our units have to be different. But it looks like both my units are cups, right? But be careful, because this is 2 cups of sugar, and this is 5 cups of flour. So it does appear that my units are different. Even though both of them are measured in cups, we have 2 different quantities, thus 2 different units. So we could write our fraction something like this: 2 cups of sugar over 5 cups of flour. So we talked about previously, when we're making this a unit rate, that we actually have to do the division. So it looks like I have 2/5, or 2 divided by 5. Well gosh, when I take 2 divided by 5, that's not going to come out very nice. If you actually did the math and turned it into a decimal, it would be 0.4. But that's it's not really how we want to write it right now. We could write it this way. But let's think about it this way. If we have 2 divided by 5, isn't that the same as 2/5? Well, of course it is, because it's written over here as 2 divided by 5, or 2/5. So what I can do, though, is actually working this division. 2 divided by 5 is 2/5. So I can write this as 2/5 cup of sugar per cup of flour. So think about for a moment what we've just done. We've actually done the division. 2 divided by 5 is 2/5. So we're going to think about this a little different. 2 cups of sugar for every 5 cups of flour. Or once we do the division, the denominator has a 1 out front. So it's going to be 2/5 cups of sugar per 1 cup of flour. So you can be careful about things like this, that even if it doesn't come out nicely, and maybe you don't want to turn it into a decimal like this, even though we very well could have in this example, we could have said 4/10 cup sugar per 1 cup flour. But we went ahead and left it as a fraction, so you can see that every 2 cups to 5 cups, but now we're talking about fractional portion, 2/5 of a cup to 1 cup. In this final example, we read that Manny can run 3 miles in 24 minutes. So again, we can write this several ratio ways, like 3 miles to 24 minutes, using the word to or a colon, but let's just go ahead and write it as a fraction, since we know that's kind of where we're headed anyway. So 3 miles over 24 minutes. Okay? So we see that this is a rate because it's a ratio where each of the units are different. We have miles on top and minutes on bottom. So in order to change this into a unit rate, we need to actually do this division and have just a 1 in the denominator. So we could say 3 divided by 24 equals 0.125, right? I mean, we could use long division or a calculator or something to figure that out. But if we have 3 over 24 as a fraction, won't that simplify to 1/8? Well, sure. So let's go ahead and keep this as a fraction. So we're going to say we can run 1/8 of a mile in 1 minute. Because when we actually go ahead and do this division, this 3 over 24, it turns into just 1/8. So we could say Manny can run 1/8 of a mile, or 1/8 miles, in 1 minute. Or we could say per 1 minute, something like that. So remember, in order to find a unit rate, you need to actually take the numbers and go ahead and do that division. And then you just have per 1 and then whatever the unit is in the denominator. So in our case, per 1 minute, or how many miles can he go in 1 minute.